This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Maximillian Naza on the show. He is the CEO and founder of PasciVite, which is a software development company that helps with digital marketing and leverages data analytics and AI tools, which is really cool. He's also the founder of Hope Records, which we're going to talk about later on in the program. Anyway, with all that being said, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, if you don't mind, tell the audience a little bit about your background, how you got into PasciVite, and what is it that you do?
Yes. So I studied computer science in school. I guess that's where my background is. And I started my career as a software engineer and tried to break into and learn my first internship. It was a bit tough because I would apply, get interviewed, get to the final stage, and I will get the dreaded answer that I thought I was having, but turns out everybody deals with this, is you don't have enough experience. And as a freshman, it was tough to hear because, it's like, who are these freshmen that you're talking to with all this experience?
Yeah.
Right. And in trying to figure out a way to get my foot in the door, I got introduced to freelancing. And my freelancing endeavors is what slowly evolved into what PasciVite is today.
So tell me about what that beginning time was. You got into freelancing and that kind of turns into a business. And I've heard a lot of stories about how that's happened over time. But when is it that you decided, like, okay, now we're going to do this for real and we're going to lock this down? What was the emotions that you went through at that time?
I don't want to say naturally happened because it doesn't sound too genuine, but it feels that way because I was reactive instead of proactive, right? The idea with freelancing was, okay, nobody will hire me, so I guess I'll hire myself, right? But then even in hiring myself, you get into a bit of sort of like legal definition because obviously I was an independent contractor. You're working with, not working for someone. So from a structure perspective, I mean, obviously you're still reporting to them because you have to make them happy. But the structure is a little bit different. So as I work through my, corporate career, I kept doing projects here and there on the side. And then I was talking to, I think I want to say maybe a year. So this was back in 2016. So about a year into it, I was speaking to a founder at a startup event, and he asked me if I had a business entity, if I had an LLC. I told him no. I was like, well, you should get one. There's a lot of tax benefits. I was like, really? So I asked around. I knew some folks, some classmates were studying accounting. So I went to them. They verified that was true. So I was like, wow, that's, seems quite appealing. And the paperwork was only $300 to file. So I did that. And so that was about 2017. And from 2017 till about 2019, I had a business, at least on paper, but I didn't really treat it like a business. It was just something that I did because I heard it would, or at least I confirmed that it would provide me some benefits, right? But as I got connected to more and more founders and I saw what they were doing, and it got into this thing where I would build apps and websites for folks, and they would ask me advice around how do we get your first customer? How do we, we've been trying to build this wait list and things haven't really gone out as well as we thought. And early on, my response was, yeah, that's not me. I'm an engineer, right? If something's wrong with your app, I'm your guy. But if you want to talk marketing or anything, I'm afraid I can't help you. But it kept happening so often that after a while, I felt like I was leaving money on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had this feeling, along the lines of, you're not rich enough to turn money away.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea was pretty simple. I'm doing marketing for myself within reason, and I'm maintaining all these clients. So how about I try to educate myself, and then the next person who asks, we help them out, do my best. If it works out, great. Maybe there's something to this. If it doesn't, then I'll definitely know that's not my lane, and I'll be able to say no without having second thoughts, right? Having buyers or I guess sellers remorse about it, or any kind of remorse. So I did, and to my surprise, people were very happy. Like, oh my goodness, I never thought about that. And it's one of those things where you kind of have a full circle moment where as a kid, it's like, why can't you just be normal? Why can't you just think like everybody? Where now all of a sudden that turned into a bit of an asset, right? Because I would come up with these ideas that were relatively simple, cheap to implement. And it made sense because of my target audience, which were, startup founders, people getting started. In many instances that were pre-revenue, I just helped them build their prototype. And in helping folks kind of improve their businesses, or at least make progress and really kind of getting that feedback, I just took a step back and decided, okay, well, for all intents and purposes, it looks like I'm helping people get off the ground. I'm not sure how effective my advice is, but going off their feedback, things seems to be going well, right? So maybe I should try doing it for myself. And I started, right? It's like, okay, well, I need to build a team. Who do I hire? How do I define, the roles? Delegation was tough, because it's like everything that I gave away, it's like, oh man, I could just do this myself. But
yeah,
I had to learn to trust people. And in many instances, really all I had to do was be clear and concise in describing what I needed. Because 12 times out of 10, they came back with something that was a lot better than I could have ever done myself, right? And I think I got lucky too with the folks that I decided to trust and bring on. So as they, kept kind of doing good work and providing value, that gave me the confidence to trust them even more. And yeah, that's really helped us, and it's gone a long way in the progress that we've been able to make as a business, as an entity.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: when it comes to taking, I guess, building things for yourself versus other clients, do you find that you're, I don't want to say easier to work with, but you have a vision of what you want, so you can kind of just do it. Whereas like doing things for other clients, sometimes it's difficult to understand the actual requirements that they're asking for.
So for me, I think it's actually harder with clients. I think it's easier with clients. Sorry.
Oh, why is that?
I have a philosophy of asking 10,000 questions. So typically what happens is if people aren't able to answer those questions, and they don't necessarily want to give up ownership around creativity, that's usually a good telltale that they're not a good fit, right? So that part is relatively straightforward, and I learned that the hard way, because we use a value-based approach with a lot of the projects that we do, meaning that our rate is fixed, and as a customer, you're paying for value. You're not necessarily paying for our time, right? You're giving us X amount, and in return, we're, providing A, B, C, D. And we work until, the work is to your satisfaction, right? And early on, we'll take on projects, and it's like, okay, we'll do this in 3 months. And I think that's really like the first 2-3 projects I did. So it was early and it was quick. It's like, okay, you will take on this project, you'll pay us, 5, 10, however many, let's say $5,000 for the sake of argument, and it's going to take 2 months, right? Now 2 months get along, and I'm, let's say, or like 70% of the way through, we have to continue to work, right, at no additional cost until the work is done, because that's what we agreed to, and then that's the deal. And that was a hard pill to swallow at first, because I realized I realized early the importance of budgeting, right? So it really came down to, okay, whenever we take on a project, how long is it going to take? How much time we're going to spend? What's going to be our cost? And does the math make sense, right? And those first few projects, the reason why there was a breakdown in communication, at least understanding on my part, is because, someone needed an app. It's, oh yeah, I can build an app. Oh yeah. So you want login, you want a database, you want users to be able to do, okay, cool, great. All right. Wow. That was so easy. Right. And then you spend time building the app, and it's like, well, actually we needed this, we wanted that. And there's just so many more issues that, aren't necessarily issues, but would have been good to know ahead of time.
Yeah.
But then now it's like, okay, I'm already in the contract, and then, I can't go back and say, well, now that you want this extra thing, it's going to cost extra, because I didn't know that was going to be a part of the equation. Because again, whose fault is that? Is it my fault for not asking? Is it their fault for not, communicating? And it was blurry because a lot of these people were non-technical folks. Right.
So they didn't even know what to ask, really. I don't know what to tell you.
So it was an issue that I wasn't sure how to sort of like communicate and express without coming off as unprofessional or unprepared. So it's like, okay, maybe I just, maybe this is just one person, right? And then it happened again, and then it happened again. It's like, okay, something's got to give, right? And the philosophy was just ask a lot of questions, right? Like, why do you want to do this? What's your goal? Is there a platform you can use out there? As far as just go to market, why don't you want to use it? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And it's really helpful. And sometimes it shocks people because they're like, wait, do you just not want my business? And I know I do. But I also want you to be happy with the output, right? I could build the greatest thing, or I could come up with the greatest strategy, but if it's not what you expected, you're not going to be happy. And, I don't want that, right? Cause I want the deal to be fair, in a sense that, obviously, we want to get compensated for the work that we're doing. But at the same time, as a customer, you want to feel like you got great value for your investment, right? And in many cases, you're dealing with, a sell cycle of a few weeks, right? So I'm trying to understand your vision in 3 to 5 weeks and go out and do the work. Meanwhile, you've been working on something for years, right? And it's just hard to translate all of that into something concise that would allow me to, me and my team to kind of hit the ground running and come back with something that you would be very happy with. So.
Yeah, I think taking that approach also helps you build a better relationship with the customer, versus just, like a transactional type thing. You're learning more about their why, what they're doing, and how to build the right product for them. Especially when you ask them, like, if they want you to build something, you say, well, is there a platform that already does this? It's almost like you're trying to give them back business.
It's 50-50, honestly. Some people enjoy it. Other people are like, wait, what are you doing? I'm trying to play 21 questions. So it's
Yeah, I guess
it's I don't want to say fine line, but it's yeah, it's an interesting thing to like deal with as far as customer relationship management. But I'd rather say no to an opportunity than say yes and not being able to deliver. So how do we put ourselves in the best position to do that?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of the things that you guys work with are in the entertainment industry, and how'd you get involved in that sector?
California, I guess.
Yeah. That'll do
it. Being based in California definitely helps. So my last full-time job was at Google. So I got hired at Google as a software engineer, which was I guess you can virtually say a dream come true. And it's a dream company for a lot of engineers out there.
Mm-hmm.
So getting there, I was introduced to a whole new world, right? Mm-hmm. I tried to work on some projects before where I try to fundraise and things like that prior to PasciVite, but never got too far enough to become anything concrete. And the other thing too is nobody would give me the time of day, right? And then I got to San Francisco, started meeting people, chatting, getting invited to events and things like that, going to various events. And as you get to know people, it's like, oh yeah, well, you're an engineer, you work at Google, so you must be smart. I happen to be an angel. Here's my card. If you're ever working on something, please give me a call.
Mm-hmm.
And that was crazy to me because it's like when I had something or when I thought I had something, nobody wanted to give me like the time of day, right? Or nobody wanted to. I mean, it was hard to even get meetings, right? But obviously, you couldn't tell me that back then, right? I thought whatever I was working on was the greatest thing ever, and it was a culture shock, right? I realized pretty early that things were done a little bit differently. And it just became a matter of, okay, how do I navigate the space and nurture those relationships, right? So with those folks, even though I didn't have anything that I thought was, worth investing in or something that I would want to fundraise for, the way I nurture those relationships was it's like, hey, I run into cross founders all the time, and most of them are looking for an investment. Would you be okay if I was to forward you opportunities, right? I can send some decks over. If you like it, make an introduction, and you guys can take it from there. And that went a long way, right? The big thing with VCs and investors is deal flow. They want to know about Google when Google was in the garage. Yeah. And when Google eventually does go public or become sort of like the hot new things, they want to be in a position. They would rather have said no, right? They would rather have been aware of the opportunity and said no than not have been aware of it, right? And I got great feedback around, oh man, like, the deals you're sending us, we're not seeing them anywhere. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, I don't know how, because I mean, I'm here. It's all, all these people are in San Francisco, so I'm not sure where sort of like the gap is happening. But over time, they became sort of like mentors and some I would even call friends. And it's been great, right? And I've learned a lot from them. Whether they invested or not, get an understanding of why they went through with an investment or why they didn't. And that's provided us great input with some of our customers because a lot of them are in the tech space. They're looking for VC funding, and where we're able to kind of provide that high touch and critical insight is okay. Number one, you don't have to fundraise, right? But if you do, here's how you can potentially position yourself.
Right. How has generative AI affected any of the relationships or things that you've been doing with these founders and these systems that you're building?
It's helped us save time. So I was actually one of the first 1,000 beta users of OpenAI.
Oh wow! So you've been there from the beginning.
Yes.
You didn't wait till Thanksgiving, rush.
Yeah, I got
a couple years ago.
I got lucky. So yeah, I've been using it for a while, and as a team, we've sort of adopted it. But my philosophy is, it's a tool that's meant to assist, not replace. It's a tool that's meant to assist us and not replace us.
Right.
So where it's created a lot of value, especially on the marketing side, is brainstorming, right? For those days or those moments where you're having, creative or some sort of block, right? Writer's block, the ability to kind of go around and say, okay, trying to do a campaign or trying to do a video production, for, this brand, which again, we try to use kind of fictional, make it fictional as, just for data privacy and things like that, especially dealing with startups. So we're trying to do an ad or a production for, ABCD Holdings Corporation, right? They're in the healthcare space, and this is a brand awareness play. Because obviously, the more context you provide, the better, right? This is a brand awareness play, and we want to create something around mental health, right? Give me 100 ideas of approaches that we could take, right? Keep in mind, this is the brand archetype, this is the tone, and really just whatever kind of metrics and data point we can provide, right? And yeah, just getting those 100 and kind of going through that and just, taking out whatever doesn't make sense, seeing if there's room to sort of combine. And when you have creative creators, when you have a block and you're able to come up with some ideas, it's great because you're able to get a seed, right? And that seed is able to kind of turn into something pretty amazing, right? Which is where it helps to kind of have a great team. So for us, it's allow us to just iterate faster.
Yeah.
Right. A process that could have taken us, 3 weeks now takes us a week and a half to 2. Right. Just because we're able to do a lot more. Whereas we could come up with 5 ideas, we're now able to come up with 20 or 25 original ideas to present to clients and customers in the first go round, right? Which the more ideas, the more angles we're able to explore, potentially the less amount of back and forth we have to have, which allows us to kind of work get to the next step quickly, and we're able to deliver on time or sometime even earlier, right? Which people are very happy with. That's something that we all value as individuals. So yeah, it's been great. But I think we've been able to kind of figure out the best way to use it for ourselves. And I think that's where most companies are potentially making a mistake, is not having the right applications, right? Or not having the right use case.
No, I think the use case is absolutely, and also not knowing what is possible versus thinking that anything is possible. Because I've talked to people and said, oh, well, just, ask ChatGPT that. I'm like, well, that's not really something ChatGPT is good at. I've noticed that one of the cool things that I've been able to use, and there's, obviously there's pros for, ChatGPT versus, what's it called? The Microsoft one, Copilot,
yes.
or using Gemini. And one of the really neat things recently I discovered with Gemini is that it's all integrated with Google Maps. So I've asked it, like, what's the best walking route between these three locations that will avoid the most people? And it can answer questions like that and give you a map showing you like where to start, what time periods, where would be the busiest, and all that good stuff.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's great for things where you deal with like a lot of data when there's logic. It's perfect. When it comes to sort of like creative ideas,
yeah,
not so much. And I mean that in the sense that you can't, again, like the map thing, right? Like you can have ChatGPT kind of take care of that end to end. Right. When it comes to more of a creative process, you have to figure out the sort of time and place to sort of like apply that, right? An analogy I like to use is with automation, right? Which I think we had a craze for that, and technically it's still happening. Not everything is worth automating, right? When you think about calling customer service, right?
Yeah.
You have to deal with a robot.
And most people just hit zero until they get to a real person.
And it's just, and because they try to get the robot to do everything, right? And it's like, that's not really how it works. Or at least that's not the best way to use that, right? Best way, in my opinion, would be, okay, routing the call to the right representative, right? Okay, what do you need help with? Billing, technical support, do you just want to talk to an operator, whatever the case may be? And then once that's been more or less settled, you have maybe account verification, right? To make sure that the person who's calling has the right to kind of discuss the account. And once you identify that, you send them to the right department, and then they talk to an agent. And then an agent can have a back and forth with them and try to understand, okay, what's going on? Can you tell me things in more details? How can I help you? And that's a better experience because one, the interaction with a robot is minimal, and two, you lower the amount of times that a customer or a user potentially has to be redirected. So, well, I'm not the right person. Let me transfer you to someone else, right? Because 8 times out of 10, when people call, or at least personally, I know when I'm calling support, it's because I'm frustrated about something. And, it's like, I just want to talk to someone because, yes, I've tried turning on and off, right? Like I've tried turning my computer on and off. I've tried deleting my cookies and, all that good stuff. And I don't need to have some, automated system like repeat the obvious to me because that's not really helpful. So it's just kind of figuring out the time and place, having it do one job, have it do it real well, and then pass it off to a human, right? Because like that's something that we long and we desire. So it's really a disservice to try to take that element out of the equation.
Absolutely. As customer service goes. Yeah, I agree 100%. I want to talk about your another venture that you have, Hope Records. How did you get started in that? And I think before the call, you mentioned that it was kind of like another venture that you started out that kind of spun off of what you're doing. But how did that come about? Where did the idea from it, and what exactly is Hope Records?
Yes, so Hope Record is a music accelerator looking to empower and enable independent artists to make a living off their crafts. So this was actually one of the original ideas, right? Going back to 18, 19-year-old me.
Okay.
So I went to school in Atlanta, and being at school, and I guess Atlanta being, the town that it is, I came to befriend a lot of musicians, right? From rappers to country singers, songwriters, composers, DJs. And these were folks with, which to me sounded very impressive at the time. It's like, oh, wow, like your stuff is on Spotify. Right. I didn't necessarily know how easy, right, it was to kind of put stuff out there. It's like today with a blog, right? Anybody can start one. But yeah, it's, oh wow, like you're a full-fledged, like you basically a professional. And as much as folks had different takes and vision about what they wanted to do with their careers, the best way to kind of move forward and things like that, two things became very obvious relatively quickly. One, the ultimate goal was to be in a position where music was their 9 to 5. Two, record labels were evil. Right?
Yeah.
Which was kind of an interesting. I'm like, okay, there's no way they can be. I mean, they're, they play a good role. They've been around for, forever. And I mean, if they're evil and everybody knows that they're evil, why are they still around? How do they keep getting away with this? Right? So, started initially just, okay, I just want to understand what a record label is. Right? And if I wanted to start a potential, like competitor, what would that look like? Right. And yeah, so in that deep dive, got into it, learned about it. And when I learned about the record label, I mean, I realized pretty quickly that the model wasn't really scalable. Just because as you got bigger, your expenses got bigger, right, as well. And it's, you get to a certain extent where like, there's just some investments you cannot afford to make, right? Again, Google coming out with a product versus me putting out a product, right? I'm able to, again, being a quote unquote nobody or like an independent entity, I'm able to negotiate deals, whether it's a, hey, like come in at this discounted rate, I can give you equity, I can give you this, I can give you that. Whereas if Google or Amazon is starting something off the bat, I mean, you're talking, $30 million startup cost, right? Just because obviously the name is behind it, it has to meet a certain quality. And obviously as they go out to hire people, I mean, nobody in their right mind, at least, is going to give Google a discount. It's like, no, you got it. Pay me. Right? So as they kind of do that, they just need to make so much more pretty quickly, whereas I have that room to kind of grow, right? And yeah, so as a record label, when you're just starting out, sure, you can afford to take some risk. You can afford to, sign people for $100,000, $200,000. But when you're Universal Records, and you're signing people for $10 million, yeah, you're gonna want to make sure that you can make that $10 million back, right? So my goal was, okay, well, how do I cater to the little guy, right? Because they're kind of overlooked. And I think as I ran through it, I discovered, like, oh yeah, I could do this, I could do that. And then I would talk to my friends and I would talk to folks in the music space, and they would just tell me, oh yeah, that already exists. So I think one of the first ideas I had was like, okay, how about instead of like, managing or having a full-fledged relationship, what if I just agreed to like promote their projects, right? And it could be like on a project per project basis, right? And I'm thinking, this is brand new, like this is gonna change everything. And they're like, oh yeah, it's called distribution. Right. And it's been around for like 30 years or however long.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really? That's crazy. So I just kind of iterated through like different things, and it's like, okay, well, that's this, that's that, that's this, that's that. And then ultimately, I want to say about a year and a half to 2 years ago, kind of got to the model now, which is an accelerator. And I looked at what we have in the business sector, right? So you have we're dubbing ourselves the Y Combinator of record labels, but I mean, you have Y Combinator, 500 Global, Techstars, and the one thing they have in common is that they work with startup early, right? Sometime pre-revenue, sometime even pre-idea. But ultimately, the goal is to get the startups to a point where they don't need them anymore, right? So my thing was, well, okay, if we were to work with folks early, and get them to teach them about branding, teach them about the business side of the music industry, show them how to potentially connect and lend various opportunities, and then get them to a point where they're viable, at least from a marketing perspective, then, one, most of them will probably choose to stay independent just because it's okay, I can do this on my own. Two, when it comes to a record label, they'd be a little bit more appealing because it's like, okay, well, here's what they've been able to do on their own or with relatively limited resources. So if we were to kind of provide them with all these extra assets, things can only go up from here, right? And the target number that we set is $250,000, right? If we can help any artist, a musician, implement processes that allow them to earn $250,000 a year, they would be doing good, right? Like when you talk about high cost of living area, right? New York, San Francisco, LA, Seattle, right? Atlanta, I guess, as of maybe a few years ago, because things are starting to like catch up. Again, you're making $250,000 if you're, if you're responsible, you can have your own place. You don't need 27,000 roommates. You can save money. You can potentially, build a studio in your basement or somewhere in your apartment. You can potentially afford to pay for like 5 to 10 hours a month to get access to high quality studio time and be able to kind of work on something that sounds good, and just put it out for folks to enjoy, right? And if we get them to that foundation, it's like, okay, you can make $250,000 a year, and whatever you do, just make sure the house of cards never falls apart, right? And just try to build up from there. Again, whether you decide to partner with a label or stay on your own, like you should be able to do fine. And that's the mission statement. That's the vision of Hope Records. And initially it was a service. We presented it as a service for PasciVite, but it led to like a lot of confusion because people would visit our site and they're like, so like, how much experience do you have with entertainment? Or like, do you build apps for a musician? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what? Let's just kind of spin it out as a separate brand. And yeah, so we've done that, as of December of last year. We've been in stealth. We made a soft launch announcement, I want to say about 2 months ago, as of, I guess, August 2024. And we have a platform called Codename Genesis, which is, we're dubbing it the Airbnb of recording studios. So we have a wait list right now. And if, any musicians are interested, definitely encourage you guys to join, hoperecords.org. But the idea is to kind of create a community of musicians and then provide them with access to studio time for free at no cost. Right. And right now we have a deal in place that would help us kind of cover those costs for about 2 years, just because it's free for the musicians. Obviously the folks that own the recording studios, they're going to want to get paid. Right. I would, as much as I want to say it's going to be free for life, I would hate to kind of make that promise, make that claim, and then have to kind of backtrack. But yeah, right now it's free, and we're going to try to make it, free for as long as possible. And the idea being, again, providing folks with resources and assets that they can use to help further their career.
No, I think that's a great mission, in helping them, get started. And a lot of musicians, they know how to make good music or they know how to make good entertainment, but they may not know all the details like that you guys will provide to help make them successful. And I think that's a great mission to get people out there and to, just help people get on their way.
No, yeah. And we take a different approach as well. And I'm going to preface what I'm about to say by saying that we're definitely not trying to like kill any dreams.
Yeah.
Right. But a lot of the players out there, you know, from a label to even some of the other accelerators, and as an artist, it's okay to kind of want that. Right. But it's like, you know, I want to be on the billboard. I want to have I want to be a rock star. I want to have a top sort of charting album, and then do all these things. And it's okay to want that, right? But you have to start from somewhere, and you have to make sure you have a solid foundation. And sure, there are some people who, again, you know, from the outside looking in, make it overnight, right? But even in the making it overnight, I think that's true of very few people. In many instances, I mean, when you hear of like I think Lil Wayne is an example where I don't know how old he was when he kind of made it big, but allegedly he'd been rapping for like the previous 10 years, right? And was a very known commodity in Louisiana, in New Orleans, right? So to the outside world, it's like, wait, who's this guy? You know, where did he come from? But there's a lot of work that kind of comes behind that. And as and a lot of people, they have the willingness, they have the ethic, they have the grit to go through those years and earn their keep. But at the same time, reality is a part of the equation, right? You have bills to pay, right? Depending on where you are, if you have a family, if you have kids, like there's just some responsibilities that, I mean, it's just reality is what it is, and you have to make the most of it, the most of what you have, right? So, our thing is, okay, you want to be a rock star, you want to be the biggest thing since, sliced bread, that's great. It's okay to want that, right? But just like any house, let's make sure we have a solid foundation, right? And then once you have that foundation, again, if you want to get more real estate, build an annex. If you want to like have some renovation and say, you know what, I want my house to be 4 stories, right? I want to have a basement. Like you can do that, but at least like have something first, right?
Right.
You can decide, you know what, I'll sell this house and go buy something else, right? Just flip it. You can do that as well, but it starts with having something. I know there's a quote out there: "Don't put all your eggs in one basket," and I'm not a big fan of that quote because it's like, you don't want to be a basket collector.
Yeah, good point.
Right? Like, it's like you got 12 baskets and no eggs. Right? So it's one of those things where you start with one basket, you put your eggs in those baskets, and as you realize that, okay, this basket is starting to get full, then you get another basket. Right. And then you kind of start transferring it over and then, do that. And then over time, you add more and more basket to the equation. Right. But don't try to get any more baskets than you need, because it's like, what's the point?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a fun conversation. How can people connect with you online, learn more about what you're doing, and just ask questions if they have any?
Yes, I am most active on LinkedIn and Instagram. So yeah, feel free to send me a request. Add in a note. Kind of explaining that I guess you learned about me from the show, things like that. I'll be on the lookout for those. Instagram as well. I tend to post content, and as far as like behind the scenes, especially for the productions that we're involved in. And yeah, feel free to send me a note. Happy to chat and interact and really help in any way that I can.
Awesome. And I'll link those in the show notes too, to geekleader.com, so people can click through and find you there. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you for having me over. Had a lot of fun.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to. Click on their links and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. And make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.